BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Amy Canavan and this is the Scottish Football Podcast, keeping you up to speed with all you need to know about the national game. It's Tuesday the 13th of August and here's what's on the agenda today.
Now we need to finish off the game in front of our fans, and we have the experience against them. You know, it's a really good team, but we could hurt them also with the things we were doing, so it will be a very interesting time.
Can Rangers dispatch Dynamo at Hampden in Champions League qualifying? Also,
Bernardo forward for Celtic, up to the edge of the penalty area, goes for goal, takes a deflection, ball, it's in! Adam Idah has scored for Celtic!
Adam Idah looks set to return to Celtic. What does his signing mean for the champions? And it's all happening at Aberdeen.
It's Bojan Miovski, it's 3-0 Aberdeen! A lethal move from Aberdeen! From their own half, forward, laid to Miovski, and he simply does not miss from there with a left foot.
With Miovski moving out, another exciting looking attacker joins up. We run the rule over the comings and goings at Pittodrie.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Plenty on the go for a Tuesday morning, and I'm pleased to say that I am joined on this fine morning by former, among others, Rangers, Falkirk and Dundee striker Rory Loy and coach, analyst and host of the Scots Abroad podcast, John Walker. Good morning to you both, guys. Are you both well?
Good, thanks, Amy.
Yep.
Raring to go. They sound well up for this one. There's plenty to discuss with Rory and John, but before all of that, let's quickly run through the latest Scottish football headlines. Rangers manager Philippe Clement has called on his players to finish off Dynamo Kyiv in front of their own fans as they aim to book a place in the Champions League playoff round. The sides meet at Hampden with the tie level at 1-1 after the first leg. Norwich City have agreed to sell Adam Idah to Celtic, subject to the Republic of Ireland striker passing a medical. Compatriot Bosun Lawal has left the Glasgow club, with the 21-year-old defender signing for Stoke City. And Aberdeen have signed Finnish under-21 international winger Topi Keskinen from HJK Helsinki on a 4-year deal. He becomes the sixth summer signing at Pittodrie as Bojan Miovski edges closer to finalising his move to Girona. Plenty on the go for a wee Tuesday morning. Let's start with Adam Idah. It looks like he is finally going to be a Celtic player permanently after Norwich City agree to sell, subject to him passing a medical, of course. Now, who really ever knows the end fee of these sort of transfers these days, but reports are that it could rise to over £9 million. Rory, is he worth it?
Well, if reports are to be believed, Amy, and you're talking around the 9 million figure. If it does get to that, it's a lot of money. That's what they paid for Odsonne Edouard. Now, Idah came in and had a big impact from January through to the end of the season. But if you're asking me, is he worth 9 million? I think for me, there would have been a tipping point. I think he's worth 5, 6, maybe 6.5 million if you want to bring him in. Anything over that, I think possibly I would have been looking elsewhere to see what else was out there for that type of money, if it does rise to 9 million. But with these types of deals these days, Amy, you don't know the stipulations on what has to happen for it to rise to £9 million. Maybe have something to do with European qualification, etc. So they would have more than enough money to do that then. So you don't know what's involved in the deals. However, he certainly came in and made a big impact last year. They need a striker through the door. Celtic are normally quite shrewd with the business deals that they do, and that's why they wait for so long. But I think with the amount of times Kyogo has looked like he may be injured, it's been enough to force Celtic's hand, shall I say. But I think £9 million for Idah is a lot of money if it does end up at that price.
It certainly seems a lot of money up here, John, but on the face of it, is it actually just the climate that clubs are sort of operating in now? You've got Norwich City, okay, they didn't actually start their championship season off to the best note at the weekend, defeat to newly promoted Oxford. But is that just the markets that Celtic and Rangers are going to have to start, functioning in? You look at Dominic Solanke last week, the money that he went was eye-watering.
I don't think it's a market the Rangers can fish in just now, unfortunately, but I think with Adam Idah having played for Celtic last year, Brendan Rodgers knows what he's getting. He's made an impact in Scottish football. I think that I would have thought 5-6 million would have been what they paid for him, but I reckon because he's been in the door, Rodgers trusts him, he knows he can play in the league, that he's probably comfortable with the extra outlay, and the fact that they've managed to get a B team player sold for £2.5-3 million, you're kind of bridging that gap a little bit. But I think for Celtic's recruitment, I think for spending almost 15 million to have the same two players in the door that they already had at the back end of last season, it's maybe just where they need to be to try and fill those gaps.
You mentioned, Rory, sometimes that Kyogo can perhaps at least appear a little bit injured or carrying a knock of some sort. Adam Idah is a totally different striker to Kyogo. Obviously, just on the face of it, you look at the two guys are very different in physique, but what does he add to this Celtic squad? Or rather, what does he bring back to the Celtic squad?
He brings a physical presence. I watched the game at the weekend, the Norwich game actually down at Oxford, and whilst Norwich were really poor, I thought when Idah came on, they managed to get up the pitch at least. And you look at the final last season, the Scottish Cup final, he comes on, and Rangers played relatively well that day. They didn't pull up any trees, they weren't amazing, but it was a very close game and Rangers played pretty well. But when Idah came on, he made a difference. Simply getting the ball up to him, taking the pressure off and getting players around him, and of course he pops up with a goal. He's quite mobile for a big guy as well. He's not slow, but I just think with the money we're talking, and I totally appreciate he's been in the building and Rodgers trusts him, but as a comparison, and don't get me wrong, the fee might be slightly higher given he's moving to a rival, but Miovski at 7 million, Idah at 9 million, so it's a good comparison, that one. But listen, Idah's a very good player and he seemed to thrive at Celtic, and I think if you've got a connection or a love for the club, then it brings out that little bit extra in a player. So look, John's right. Maybe Rodgers was more comfortable getting that over the line with a little bit more than they would have liked to have paid, but I still think they need one more striker.
Just wrapping this one up then, John, Rory sort of touched on it there, and you mentioned it earlier, the money that has been spent on a combined Bernardo and Idah. Where else do you see Celtic needing to strengthen?
I think one of the biggest stories for Celtic is going to be whether they hold on to Matt O'Reilly, because as a Rangers fan, if Matt O'Reilly leaves Celtic Football Club, even with Idah and Bernardo in, you need to get somebody in that fills 35 goal involvements somewhere, and I don't think they've covered that yet. I don't think Bernardo's it, although I think he's a very good player. Idah's more of a backup striker to Kyogo. I think the biggest transfer for Scottish football will be if Matt O'Reilly leaves, that gap in Celtic's team is going to be massive, and the way they've staggered over the line with the Idah transfer and kind of jump ship now that Kyogo's maybe injured, I don't see that they've got Matt O'Reilly's replacement lined up as of yet.
Right, on to tonight's big game. Rangers face Dynamo Kyiv in Champions League third round qualifying. It's been shown live on the BBC Scotland channel, with the tie delicately poised at 1 apiece after the first leg. John, what were the learnings from last week? Obviously the ending was the most impressive part for Rangers, but where is the optimism coming from heading into tonight?
I think now that we've seen them for 90 minutes up close, because I think any Rangers fan that was watching the results from the Partizan two legs, it struck the fear into a Rangers team that we had seen defending in pre-season and defending in general as a Rangers fan. So seeing them up close after scoring 9 goals over Partizan was probably a reflection more on Partizan than it was Dynamo Kyiv. I think they were very predictable in the way they played. I was surprised at how obvious it was what they were trying to do. When Rangers adjusted their press in the second half, they looked kind of lost a little bit and were going very, very direct. I think with Proper back in, Balogun, Suter, I don't think that will cause us too many problems. For me, it's more a case of which Rangers turn up. If it's the Rangers that played the second 45 against Kiev and the first 45 against Motherwell, I think Rangers can finish the job off. If it's the Rangers that finished the 45 against Motherwell, there might be some Thursday nights ahead for me.
Rory, John expresses his pleasure at the press last week from Rangers. Is that where you see Philippe Clement's side hurting Kyiv tonight?
Yeah, quite possibly. But what you often see from teams coming away from home, sometimes in Europe, is the first 10-15 minutes they don't take any risks, especially when you drop down from the really, really top level. Obviously the top teams in the world, your Manchester Cities and Barcelonas and things, won't do that, but it can sometimes be a tactic just to kind of quell the crowd type thing. The problem Rangers have got, in my opinion, is they're always going to be compared to Celtic, and it takes time at the start of a season, especially when there's so many comings and goings, so much upheaval and a bit of drama around Rangers at the moment, that it can be quite difficult to settle into a rhythm and a pattern play consistently. So it's a difficult one to predict tonight. I expect Rangers to go through the tie. I think they're more than capable of it, having watched the game last week. And I think it was a big win for them at the weekend. I know it was a home game against Motherwell, no disrespect to Motherwell, they'll be expected to win that. But I think after the draw in the opening game, I think that was a big win. And I think they'll be hoping to gain a little bit of momentum off the back of it. So Černý looks a good player, and hopefully he can make an impact.
How is the mood in the stands, John? Rory sort of touches on it there, between the draw on opening day, then the late draw last week, then the first half against Motherwell, but then the second half against Motherwell. It's already a little bit like riding the waves, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, dropping points to Hearts was the most inevitable thing that was going to happen. I think every Rangers fan was prepared for being 2 points behind Celtic by the end of that weekend. It kind of was sad that was the case. And then you feel like you're already chasing your tail with Old Firm being at Parkhead at the end of the month. The stands was infamous impacted people. Hampden seemed more empty, but I know there's a habit at Hampden where people kind of find where their pals are and just move around and kind of cram their way in. It just felt a bit off. Hampden's not great for atmosphere unless it is cup finals and big Scotland games. It was just a bit of a weird one, and I think there is that tentativeness when it's 2-1 in a narrow game, and everyone started to look tired very quickly when Černý goes off. Černý looks like the kind of special one of that front three just now. When he goes off, it looked really, really flat.
Sorry, Černý's at the edge of the box, shoots and it's a wonderful goal! What a goal that is! From the unknown Wolfsburg player, he picked up, drove to the edge of the area, right-hand side of the D, and he's bent it with the left peg into the far corner of the net past Oxborough. Rangers back in front, Rangers 2, Motherwell 1, and I think the Rangers fans have a new hero in Václav Černý.
Just touching on Černý there, Rory also said how impressed it was by him. The goal in itself is a piece of brilliance, but is there already the pressure perhaps being put on him by the fans that, right, this is our guy to shine?
100%.
Well, I think that that comes with having missed a player in that position for years who can make an impact. And I think, again, given the amount of players Celtic have signed that have made such an impact, you look at the likes of Jota and Kuhn, who's now starting to make an impact, Abada. You look at these players, they sign, they almost pluck from obscurity, and then they come in and do so well. Rangers aren't as good at that. So I think every time there's a little glimmer of hope that somebody can come in and do that, they kind of cling on to that. And there's been so many disappointing signings at Ibrox for a number of years now that I think, given what they've seen from Černý, they'll be hanging on to the hope that he can be their 35-goal contribution man like Matt O'Reilly, etc. But I do think in the stands I think it's very, very much on the edge of a cliff at the moment. I think that it's almost one bad game in the league away from disaster if they fall further behind it, and it's early in the season. And I just think for the whole club, they really need to get through tonight to try and stop any potential moans and grumbles and complaints.
Just while we've got you here, John, Rory mentions picking players from obscurity. Not quite obscurity in the case of Conor Barron, but how impressed have you been? Are you pleased that he's finally in the door? I don't think I've spoke to you since he did sign.
Yeah, Conor Barron, I think I said this many a time, Conor Barron was a no-brainer of a sign, and he looked like somebody that could make the step up. I actually think as difficult it is to sign people with an affordability from other Scottish clubs, I think the grounding of being at like an Aberdeen, Kilmarnock, Motherwell, you lose a bit of ego, you maybe bring in a bit more work rate, a bit more hunger and desire. And Conor Barron obviously had the technical abilities, played for Scotland under 21s with people like Lewis Serene. So he's got that level, you know he's at that level. So I just think that extra bit of work rate, and as stupid as it sounds, Rangers fans are no different from other football fans, with the exception of being fully expected to win things all the time. But see people that run, tackle, and give their all. That's all people want, and it does seem like that's actually been missing for a long time. So he's already seeming like he's a bit of a fan's favourite 3 games into his career.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Finally, it's been a busy old time at Aberdeen this summer. They're flying high under Jimmy Tillin, who's made an impressive start in the Pittodrie dugout. But now talismanic striker Bojan Miovski is expected to join Girona, while Finland under-21 winger Topi Keskinen has joined the club from HJK Helsinki. Now let's go with the deal that has been done. Rory, I'm going to come to you first. I'm pretty sure you would have saw him last year against Aberdeen, didn't you?
I did. He played in both legs, and he was very good, to be fair. Both our wingers, Helsinki, were decent. Keskinen played on the left in the first tie at Pittodrie. They were a little bit more attacking over in Finland, which meant that Keskinen played further up the pitch. But I was impressed with him. He was very good at arriving at the back post late when the attack was going down the other side. He relieved pressure by getting them up the pitch. Good runner with the ball, but he was also calm in possession, which you don't often see from wingers like him, because I don't know if he'll play through the middle to start with. I really don't. I don't know if he'll be used as a kind of a wider player, but we'll wait and see how it pans out for Topi Keskinen. But I was impressed with him when he was at Helsinki last year. Like I said, always a threat, always willing to go forward, always showing for the ball, tricky with the feet, and can pop up with a goal.
I'm impressed you managed to see him beyond the snow last year in Finland. John, I know you are always looking into these sorts of guys. Rory's mentioned in there he doesn't know, perhaps will he play more through the middle? Can you shed any light?
I would have him as in the 4-2-3-1. He's the left winger for me. I think just looking at little clips about him, looking at his goal return, he's just so impressive how direct he is. Rory mentioned that there's a lot of clips where he's picking the ball up from defensive corners and driving 90 yards with the ball, and always seems to be at full speed, never seems to slow down. Defenders don't seem to be able to get back. I actually think, as a Rangers fan, I'm kind of relieved that he's not coming to join and supply Miovski, because I think that would have been absolutely terrifying. I do think it's a very exciting winger. I was so impressed. Obviously, you see these highlight reels, it's kind of hard to judge how good somebody is. I've only seen him over the 90 on the Aberdeen away leg, but it's just so direct all the time, drawing fouls, cutting inside, scores a lot of goals from outside the box. I think he's a very exciting signing, and if he can hit the ground running, I think it's somebody that Aberdeen fans will take to very, very quickly.
So you mentioned there that would be supplying Bojan Miovski if Miovski was still here, which technically still is an Aberdeen player, but then if that move does transpire as we all sort of expect it to do, then there is a Miovski-shaped hole still then, isn't there, in Aberdeen?
Yeah, and I've not been hearing any murmurings as to who that would be. But Jimmy Tillin's obviously got an idea as to what his recruitment's going to be. He's made a few signings from Scandinavia. I don't know if that's another one they're going to try and pluck from. But he might fill a hole as a centre forward just now. But I think it's very much as a left winger that's going to be able to get them up the park and supply for a number 9. You
sort of touched on it when we were talking about Adam Idah, Rory, the fee that Bojan Miovski is perhaps going for. Would you expect that he could potentially go for more, that Aberdeen could have got more for him, or is it just a case now that, you know, it's sort of dragged on for most of the summer, this is he going to go, is he not going to go kind of thing?
No, I think it's a good fee. £7 million, I think that is a very good fee. Now, again, how much of it's up front, how much of it's add-ons, again, you never know how deals are structured these days. It's far more complicated than it used to be. But I think it's good. You know, you look at Brendan Rodgers down at Celtic saying, you know, you buy the player, not the league. It's a bit of a difficult one, that, I think, because, you know, Celtic haven't been great in Europe over the last few years. Matt O'Reilly's not been, you know, amazing in Europe by any stretch, so he's performing in the Scottish Premier League, so you do have to take the league into consideration to an extent. There's no guarantees that Matt O'Reilly goes to Serie A or La Liga and is amazing, so I just think it's has got to be an element of the league in it. But I think Miovski, I think £7 million for Miovski's, I would say it's probably exactly on the nose as to what I would expect them to pay. So it's good business for Aberdeen, and it'll hopefully give Jimmy Tillin he'll be hoping a little bit of a budget to go and get somebody in, because, you know, Miovski, as good as he is, again, they signed him when he wasn't, you know, a well-known face, so I don't know how much he would have been earning at Aberdeen. So, you know, they might be able to go out and get somebody in and be able to offer them good money. So we'll wait and see who fills that hole, but certainly a very good start for Jimmy Tillin. And that start also gives him leverage to go to the board and say, look, a couple more signings and, you know, we'll be pushing and challenging.
It certainly does. And John, just finally, in case we have any Girona fans listening in, I'm sure they are a regular into the Scottish Football Podcast, but in particular today, if they're wondering what they're going to get in Bojan Miovski, what would you be telling them? What will he bring to Girona more than anything?
This is probably a bit of a mental statement, but see, off the back of watching them a lot last season in La Liga, I was so impressed with how good they were. Obviously, they're part of the City group, so they are got the Man City philosophy. They play good football. It's very attacking. I think for one thing Dubrovnik had was he wasn't very good 1v1, wasn't very good at dribbling with the ball. I don't see Miovski as having anything other than proper physical stature. Miovski's no slouch, but Dubrovnik's 6'4", very, very strong, a good hold-up player. I don't think Miovski's missing anything that Dubrovnik had, and I think that's probably a good sign of why the fee's so good, because if there's a sell-on, he's in a Champions League window, he's in a team that's going to supply him. The one thing for Miovski, and I keep saying this, Miovski's fed off scraps for 2 years up here in a disappointing Aberdeen side. If he's got a team that play the way Girona do and get chances to him, I don't see where he would falter or where the gap would be. He's scoring goals at a national level. He's scored goals in Europe. He scores all types of goals. Great with his head, great 1v1, great making goals out of nothing, a very composed finisher. One-touch finishes are his kind of forte. I don't really know what they'd be missing. I don't know if they've signed somebody else to be ahead of him, but if he's their number 9 and they play with the similar style they had last year, I can't see how he doesn't go and score goals in La Liga, because the defences aren't as low blocked, they aren't as aggressive, they aren't kind of man-marked and tight. I can't see how he doesn't take to La Liga like a duck to water, to be honest.
Well, Girona fans, if you do end up getting Bojan Miovski, you're welcome for that rundown. That is all we've got time for. My many thanks go to Rory and John, and thank you for listening. Remember, you can watch Rangers' crucial Champions League tie with Dynamo Kyiv live on BBC Scotland from 7:30 tonight. You can also hear full radio commentary on BBC Radio Scotland Extra and follow the live text commentary on the BBC Sport Scotland website. Jonathan Sutherland will be here on the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early tomorrow morning with all the latest news and reaction to and analysis of whatever happens at Hampden. So make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you listen so you don't miss out. But for now, bye-bye.
Just a quick reminder, the Behind the Goals podcast is available every Tuesday with me, Rachel Corsey, and me, Leanne Crichton. It's your one-stop shop for our take on everything that's happening in the world of football. Just head to BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts and search for Behind the Goals.